Okay, thanks everyone for joining in. Just a quick system check. I hope everyone can hear us and see our videos. We are already sharing some screens. If you cannot hear us, there's a chat box on the right-hand side of your panel. So feel free to put in any questions or if you're having any audio difficulties. I'm I'm Sri Neve. I'm the VP of Operations for North America. I have some 10 years of odd experience working with business intelligence in this particular domain. Along with me, I also have Anna, who is co-hosting the webinar and moderating the chat. So she's also here. If you have any questions, feel free to ask her questions. If there are any questions regarding the topic we are covering today, feel free to put them on the chat box, and we'll go ahead and address the questions as soon as we get them or during that relevant section. So today's topic, we're talking about real-time analytics with ClicData. So a few things we're going to cover just in general about why do you need real-time analytics? What is the importance of having that? What role does it play in today's business? We're also going to talk about challenges with real-time analytics. Everyone wants real-time analytics, businesses need it, but not everyone can have it. There are certain challenges related to real-time analytics that the businesses have, and we're just going to talk briefly about those challenges. And then we're going to deep dive into a feature-focused demo, which is going to be a live demo showcasing two of our features, the data hook and API. I'll talk about those features and also showcase with few examples on how to set up a data hook on ClicData, how to use that particular data hook, and how to set up an API and how to use that API. We'll also see some live dashboards in action. So as soon as we see the data, the dashboards are going to update, and we'll see the entire functionality working. So let's get started with why do you need real-time analytics? So really the basic answer that everyone has is you need real-time analytics to make immediate decisions. Businesses are generating terabytes of data every minute, every second, and having a real-time analytics really allows you to make that immediate decision, not waiting until end of the day, end of the week to see what happened in your business and then go ahead and make that decision. But just seeing it immediately, something is happening, either positive, negative, and making those immediate decisions. It also allows you to enhance customer experience. So imagine you're at a retail store or you're on an e-commerce website. The customers are browsing something. We have data that is collected, and this allows us to do effective marketing for that particular customers or guide the customers to the right next step. And that can only be done if we are understanding how the customers are behaving with the platform, with your product in real time. The other two aspects that people don't really talk about so much is operational efficiency. If you're a manufacturing unit, you want to make sure if your machines are not working, you understand that real time. If you are low on inventory, you understand that real time, not at the end of the week where you cannot do anything to solve that problem. And real time analytics does give you that operational efficiency that you need to make those immediate decisions. And risk management, I think, is a big part of real-time analytics. Today's companies go through a lot of data. They might be working with critical data, sensitive data, and if something is wrong with your system, let's say if there's a phishing attack, if there is a data breach, you don't want to wait until 10 days to understand that something happened. You really want that information immediately so you can mitigate the risk that is happening to your accounts, mitigate the risk that is happening to your organization, and take immediate actions. And those are some of the areas why I think every businesses today need real-time analytics. In terms of how some of the use cases that we've seen where people can use real-time analytics is retail. As I spoke about, adjusting the marketing strategy. Retail customers have customers on their floor on a daily basis. Customers are going through different items on the shelf. And if certain items are running low, you want to know and go ahead and get that inventory so that you can stock up the inventory immediately. In production, as I said, the machine status, shipment monitoring. If your shipment is delayed, you don't want to know that 2 days later, or if your customer is expecting a shipment, they want status updates of your shipment in real time so that they can understand when they're about to receive that particular shipment. Stock is a very good example. Everyone has worked with stocks. Anything to do with financial markets, you want real time data there so that you can take trade decisions in real time. You can buy stocks at the current price. You can sell stock at the current price. Anything, even microsecond of delay in stock market could mean millions of dollars of losses and different market implications. Healthcare is another sector where we know real-time analytics is key. They want to make sure if some things are happening in the operation theaters, optimizing those operation theaters usage needs to happen real time. If there's an inpatient and an outpatient that happens, and as soon as the patient leaves, you want to maximize the time within the operation theater to get the new patient in. Or if you're having critical monitoring systems in your um, hospital areas, you want those critical monitoring system to actually show real time data. So this is a bit about who needs it, why you need it, but let's talk about the challenges. One thing that I found fascinating is around 73% businesses today, they say that they need real-time analytics. So Harvard Business Review case study says that, but only 12% of the enterprises have infrastructure in place. Having the right infrastructure in place is the core requirement of actually setting up real-time analytics. Today, you're working with so much data and you have data latency issue. One system might not talk with other system immediately. Your data is not coming in from a single source anymore. In the previous days, you had one single source of data, but now your businesses are using 10 different applications. And to get any insights about any specific operation within your business, you might need to integrate data set from 10 different applications into one single KPI or a dashboard to actually get valuable insights. And that is one challenge that it poses, that maybe you can set up real-time analytics with one of your data set, but you can't set it with all of your data set, and then it's not useful. You need to be able to do that with all of your data sets. Managing volume is also important. Real-time data is typically handled in a low volume scenario, but businesses today don't generate low volume, they generate high volume. You should be able to process high volume data immediately and make it available for the end users so they can take those real time decisions. And the last thing is security. While working with real time data, what we have seen is there's a lack of data governance happening onto this particular data set that people are sending. There's a lack of data ownership, there's a lack of data stewardship that is happening. So making sure everything is available to the right people at the right time. You have some security implications that organizations are finding difficult to manage through, and those are some of the challenges that you might face if you're starting to work with real-time analytics. In the next section, I'm going to talk about two ClicData features. The first one I'm going to introduce is the ClicData data hook. Very soon, we're also going to go to a live demo, but I just want to give you a brief introduction on what the data hook is. Basically, most of your applications that you might end up using today, they have something called as webhook. Webhook is a URL that allows an application to push the data to that particular URL. ClicData is an application that accepts data. So what we do is we provide you with an URL that you can configure on different applications, and we can keep on listening to the incoming data. As soon as the data is received on ClicData, we can trigger updates, we can perform actions, we can give alerts. And that is kind of the whole setup of data hook. It's a port or a URL that is continuously listening for any incoming data. As soon as it receives the data, it starts a flow of action. It might update your data sets that are being used on the dashboard. It might send you a message on Slack because that's the alert that you want, or it might perform an action that once one system sends the data, I want a new action to be performed on a second system, and we can go ahead and perform that action on a second system. Here's a visual representation of what a data hook might look like. So there is this app that is sitting on your side, and we are provided with a data hook endpoint. And basically, the app is continuously sending data to this particular endpoint. And as soon as we receive that data, we can update the table, and has a post action to the tables that have been updated. We can either trigger data flows, we can trigger data streams, dashboards, reports, or publish those binders that you have created within ClicData. The next one I want to talk about, next feature, is the API. API is also a very good feature that most of your applications have. API allows your development team to have more control over how they receive the data, on how they can go ahead and publish the data to different applications. ClickData does provide a RESTful API service. So basically, with our API service, your development team can create an application on your side that combines different data sets together and pushes it to ClicData in real time. It can also trigger actions. Maybe they want to create an application that pushes the data to ClicData in real time, but along with that, sets up a refresh on a data set, or a refresh on a data flow that you have created on ClicData, or a publication of a dashboard. So it can also be done using the API. It allows you to automatically manage the whole system. Basically, you can get an account on ClicData, and you don't even need to log in on the platform. Using the API, you can create a new data set on ClicData, bind it to a dashboard, create a dashboard, and publish the dashboard to anyone. So everything can be automated, so that if there is a scenario where every new client you onboard, you want to create a new dashboard for that particular client and connect it to a new data set, it can be done through an API in real time, so that as soon as you get a client, a new dashboard is created on ClicData on your account for that particular client, and that dashboard is automatically shared with that particular client. It can all be done without you having to log in to the platform. With this, I'll go a little bit on showcasing how to use these features within ClicData. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. So I've moved from the presentation to the screen. If you cannot see the screen, let Anna know, and she'll inform me so that I can stop sharing and start sharing again. Okay, perfect. So this is the application on ClicData, and here you can see we have a few different modules. So you do have a dedicated section for API apps, and you have a dedicated section for data hooks. Within data hooks, you can start setting up different data hooks. So as I said, data hook is essentially just a URL that you can configure on different applications to listen to data. So I'll try to give you some examples. Let's say if you're using HubSpot. HubSpot allows you to set up webhooks within HubSpot. Basically, what HubSpot says is, if you want to, if a contact is created on their side, and if you want to push that particular contact to a different application, you can set up a webhook. So in terms of creating a webhook, all they ask you is create a webhook within HubSpot, provide a URL, and for the provided URL, they can go ahead and send the data. So this is an example of a subscription that is being sent to a URL, and anytime a new subscription is created on particular HubSpot object, HubSpot will take care of pushing that data onto the URL. Now, ClicData is receiving this information maybe on a data set that you have connected to ClicData, and you want the dashboards to be updated as soon as a new subscription or a new contact is created on HubSpot. A similar setup exists on Salesforce. Salesforce also allows you to create different webhooks, which um, based on certain actions. Again, like a contact is created, you want to set up a webhook that sends the data to a URL. So each of these third-party applications that you're going to work with, they'll have something called as a webhook. And for you to set up the webhook, you would need a URL that is essentially your listening port. Now, ClicData will allow you to set up this URL. So if you want to create a URL within ClicData, you just go ahead and go to the data hook module on ClicData. You say, I want to create a webhook and start by giving a name. This is my Salesforce contact webhook. Once a name has been provided, you would have an endpoint that you can use to configure on your HubSpot account or your Salesforce or any other application. You can also define what information are you receiving from that particular account. For instance, I'm receiving maybe the contact name. I can choose in certain macros that I receive a contact name as part of the body, and it's available inside my contact name module, and I can start defining those parts here. You can choose to start adding actions. If ClicData receives a data, what do you want to happen next? You might want to insert a row onto a table or delete a row. Sometimes you might want to just refresh a table. So you start choosing the right action, and not just one action. You can also choose multiple actions. So if a row has been inserted to a table on ClicData as your first action, what do you want your second action? Maybe the second action I want to do is execute a data flow or run a schedule. And now ClicData will insert a row onto your data set. The dashboard will be updated, and maybe a schedule that sends the dashboard to my client needs to be executed immediately after that. I can run that schedule. So the dashboard gets sent to my end users as a PDF. So people are starting to get that real-time information as soon as the data is generated. In my example, what I've done is I've created a survey dashboard, essentially a dashboard that is collecting surveys for different participants. And this dashboard is a live dashboard that I've shared with my end users. And what I would like to achieve here is as soon as someone fills up a survey on my platform where the form is available, the dashboard gets updated with the number of participants, the responses, and the response that that particular participant has given. The dashboard is connected to a dataset on my account, which is called as the customer survey response dataset. In this example, I have created a data hook, which has a specific endpoint. And on this endpoint, I have set up different macros that as soon as an information is available here, I want to capture the question, the response percentage, the question number, of that particular body that I'm getting. And you can just click on this Explorer node to understand what are the different responses that you're receiving on that particular endpoint on ClicData, and choose to set those up in the right way. And once I have that information, anytime I receive that information, I am choosing to go ahead and push it to my data set. I'm setting up that the ID should come from my ID that I have captured during while listening to that particular endpoint. With this setup that I've done, now I can see on my history that every time I'm receiving a data, it's getting captured on my data set. So right now I have 510 rows, and I've set up an example to actually show you how the data can be pushed to ClicData. So here I've copied the link from the data hook, which is available on this endpoint. And I have a JSON object that is going to be pushed to that particular endpoint. So if I receive a response, let's say I receive a response for a different ID, I go ahead and my third-party application, in this case is the Postman, it actually sends the data to this particular URL. And as soon as the data is received on this particular URL, ClicData starts processing this data. So you would see within a few seconds, ClicData was able to capture the response ID, the name, the response, and it was able to process this request. And at the very same time, it was able to update this particular data set to capture that particular information. And immediately, my number of participants went from 48 to 49 because I received a response. So this is a good example of something that happens real time. Every time you have data, ClicData is continuously listening for that particular information. And as soon as we receive the information, ClicData would go ahead and process the data and update the dashboard to show you the latest information. So that's one example of how you can achieve real-time analytics while using ClicData. The second approach that you could also use is through APIs. So if you want to use APIs, ClicData does provide an entire documentation on different API endpoints that you have available. In case you're interested to update data sets, the two most important endpoints for you would be get table, so you can understand the table that is already existing on ClicData and get some properties for that particular table. And the second important endpoint would be the ability to insert rows to that particular table ID that you have on ClicData. We have examples of different codes. So if your developers are developing something in PHP, VB, or curl, we do have some samples that they can use to start understanding on how to do this kind of development. And as I said before, the APIs are not just restricted to updating the data. You can actually go ahead and create an entire dashboard. So maybe as part of the development that you're doing, you want to get a data set from somewhere, upload the data to ClicData, but also create a dashboard automatically based on existing dashboard, and now go ahead and set up a schedule and send the dashboard to someone. So everything can happen uh, using the API and some development on your side with your development team. So let's get into an example of using APIs on ClicData. So in this particular example, what I'm trying to do is on a retail e-commerce website, I keep on getting orders frequently when someone goes ahead and buys something. I can see right now I have around $1.49 million in sales, around 7,102 orders. And I would like to set up an environment where as soon as I receive an order on my website, this data gets pushed to ClicData and the dashboard gets updated with the latest orders. To do such setup, I already have a data set that is collecting all my orders. So I'm also updating this data on a schedule maybe once every day. But rather than waiting for the schedule to run, as soon as the data is received, I want ClicData to capture that information. So I've done a small, just an illustration, again, using Postman as my application. And this, in your case, could be any application, Postman, Fiddler, or an in-house development that your team is doing. And I'm using two endpoints from ClicData to set this up. The first endpoint I'm using is the ability to just view my table. So here I can go ahead and get information and see my table. Right now I have around 208,267 rows on ClicData. What I would like to do is on this particular table, I would like to insert some information. So I have created some dummy orders, 4 or 5 different orders. I'm going to go ahead and just try to give some names to these orders and order ID. 1 second. And as soon as I give this order, I would like to post this data to ClicData. So using API, I go ahead and send this data. And within seconds, you would see that the data got inserted on ClicData, and the number of rows increased to 271 because I got 4 different rows added to ClicData. And at the same time, the dashboard got refreshed to go ahead and display more orders, the 2 orders that I've inserted, and the 2 orders are now available on the dashboard itself. So that's a bit of how you can use API or data hook with ClicData to go ahead and start creating real-time dashboards. This stage, I'm going to open up the floor for any questions that you might have. So if there are any questions from the audience, or if someone wants to know more about any of these 2 features, I'd be happy to talk more about that.
So yeah, thank you, Shri. That was very interesting to see the full flow from A to Z, real time. I think it made a lot of sense. And yeah, so we do have some questions. One which
Okay.
I think is really interesting is how should actually one decide when to use data hook or when to use the API?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, data hook is typically a place which listens to one data row to say at one time. If we are going to the example of Salesforce, every time a contact is created, Salesforce will send the contact to a system. Typically, webhooks only send one object to an endpoint, and if that is the setup you have, that one order is created and one order needs to be sent, then data hook is the right place because it's an easier way to set up. You have a third party application that already has webhook, and you don't need any sort of additional development. But the drawback or the challenge with data hook is it will only accept one item at a time. So if you have a scenario where you're running an e-commerce site and you might have five different customers on your site creating generating orders at the very same time, or let's say you are in a manufacturing facility which is capturing sensor data and it has capturing sensor data on five machines at the same time, you're not sending one row to ClicData. Rather, you're sending five or multiple rows to ClicData. And in that case, API approach is a better approach. So that would be one differentiation. If it's one row, then you could go with data hook. But if it's more than one row, you have to go with API. And the second differentiator would be if the third party application already has a webhook, does not require any additional development, use a data hook, much easier to set up. But if it doesn't have that, we recommend using an API because your in house team would have more control on how the data is being sent, how the data is being structured, and what tables need to be updated on ClickData.
Right. We have also another question, maybe it's more of a note, I would say. So Jay's saying that I assume also, although it's listening on the data hook, so the data hook is listening to the webhook, you only use a refresh when it's activated, right? So that means that it's also interesting to use data hooks in regards to refresh consumption.
Yeah, so we do have, based on the subscription that you might have, you do have different limits on the data hook because we are continuously listening and we don't want to cap it on how much we can listen. So there is a separate data hook limit that we have for each of your subscription. And along with that, if you receive a data and if you're refreshing five tables, you would also end up consuming data refreshes along with the data hook listening consumption. So those are two separate metrics that you would have on your subscription. They are independent of each other, but to answer the question, you would need both. You would need a limit on the data hook to keep on listening to objects. If you're going to send 10,000 objects, your subscription should be able to listen to 10,000 rows. And you also need a data refresh limit to keep on updating the data set as soon as we listen to it.
Right. So another question here I have is like, what happens if you have a data flow on top of your data, which processes the data that is refreshed by a data hook or the API? How do you handle that?
So typically, what we recommend is if you're setting up a data hook, and most of the clients today on Click Data would not just have one table connected straight to the dashboard. They might have data flow sitting on top of those two or three different tables before it goes to the dashboard. So always make sure that you have a post action. The first action is once I receive a data, I want it to update my data set, but the second action could be once the data set has been updated, I want it to go ahead and run a data flow. So here on the data flow module, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. You have two types of action. So first is insert a row, but the second is the post action. What happens once a row has been inserted? Maybe I want to execute a data flow so that the dashboard, which is not connected straight to the data set, but a dependent data flow, um, will be executed and the dashboard will still be refreshed with the latest data.
Right, and because you can actually also just launch a schedule, you could launch any other type.
Yeah, you could
Sorry,
also
run the
launch any
schedule.
other
You can
kind.
also launch other stuff, other type of actions through the schedule
Right.
actually.
It doesn't have to be just data flow related. One of the interesting cases I've seen is people also go ahead and run schedule or run alerts once the data has been updated. And rather than having a schedule, let's say I have no action, but if a row has been inserted, I can go ahead and set up an alert on ClicData. So I can set up a conditional alert that calculates the number of rows that I have on a specific data set. And as soon as the number of row increases, my alert usually goes from false to true or something. I can choose to even go ahead and do a web service. So a use case here is if a contact has been created on my HubSpot account, I want ClickData's dashboard to show the contact, but I also want a task to be created on my project management tool that allows my project managers to go ahead and reach out to that particular contact. Or maybe I want to create a task on my calling tool, which allows my call center people to go ahead and pick up the phone and call that particular customer because a customer has been created. So using data hook, we can listen to the data, and then using alert, you can actually send that information to a different system, maybe like aircall, api.aircall.com. I can post a call to that particular system, send the information that I've received, and as soon as you do that, a task is also created on your aircall. So it's not just limiting to running data flows or running schedules or running dashboard. You can actually think about it as a task management tool. If a data has been received, I want to create a new task on a third party application, and you can complete the whole loop.
Right, that's a hell of a workaround. um, so we also have a question back to the previous point actually. So what happens if 10 people send a similar, uh, send something to a data hook at the same time? What happens? Is just one being taken into account, or is it slower? Are the 10 being counted and received?
So if multiple, the only difference between a data hook and API is API you can send batch of data, so you can send 10 rows in one call. But in data hooks, you have to keep on sending those 10 rows individually. In terms of processing, ClickData will still process all the 10 rows. Um, they'll just be queued up and processed. Usually, processing a data hook takes less than a second. So I would say if it's 10 rows, then you would have probably 5 to 6 seconds before all those 10 rows are updated on your dashboard. Whereas within, if it's one row, it might take less than a second for the dashboard to be updated. So mm, that would be the difference. Sending 10 rows is fine. The processing time might increase, but we're still talking about going from zero point 0.5 second to probably 2 or 3 seconds. Even 1 second is too much for a data hook to process. It doesn't even take a second. It's fairly instant, like maybe zero point 0.2 seconds for that data to be processed.
All right, so we have no more questions, I think. So I think maybe we can wrap it up.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for joining the session today. I hope this was useful and you can start using data hooks and API within ClickData. It is a very, I think, niche feature, but once you start using it, you will realize that the BI tool itself that you think is just limited to dashboard is not really limited to dashboard. It can also start taking more actions, more proactive actions. You can also go ahead and create an entire automated system around it to make your life easier. So good luck and enjoy using ClickData.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.